This demolition is unauthorized. You need to cease operations immediately.
I am sick of the homeowner association.
I was in Chicago testifying in a federal fraud case when my neighbor texted me a photo, a pile of rubble where my house used to be. "Daniel, what happened to your house? There are bulldozers. Everything's gone." My 1,200 square foot fixer-upper, demolished. Foundation and debris. The HOA had done it while I was gone. County permits. Demo crew at 7 a.m. By noon, it was rubble. Diane Merrick, the HOA president, supervised it personally. She told neighbors I was delinquent on dues, $9,000 owed, property abandoned, everything legal. I pulled up my bank records. 36 consecutive monthly payments, never missed one. Auto pay for 3 years. Someone had falsified records to make me look delinquent. Diane didn't know I'm FBI, Financial Crimes Division. 15 years. I investigate fraud for a living. She demolished the house of an FBI agent who specializes in uncovering exactly the kind of fraud she'd been committing for 6 years. I spent 3 weeks analyzing HOA records like a case file. Found $876,000 in embezzlement, fake vendors, inflated invoices, wire transfers across state lines. By the time Diane realized who she'd targeted, federal agents were executing search warrants at her home. 8 years in federal prison, full restitution. I rebuilt my house, better than before, mostly with her money. But before we jump in, tell me where you're tuning in from today. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I stepped out of the federal courthouse, called Mike Torres immediately. "Mike, what the hell happened?" "The HOA demolished it this morning. They said you hadn't paid dues in 3 years, and the house was abandoned. They had county permits. It happened fast. Demo crew showed up at 7 a.m., and by noon, it was rubble. I'd been gone 2 weeks, working a case in Chicago, testifying against a CFO who'd embezzled $14 million from his company through fake vendor contracts. And in that time, my house had been erased. Mike, I paid my HOA dues, auto pay, every single month for 3 years. Diane Merrick was here supervising the demolition. She had paperwork, county permits, everything. She told people you were delinquent and the property was abandoned under county ordinance. Diane Merrick, HOA president, lived 4 houses down from me. I'd met her exactly twice, once when I bought the house in 2018 and once at an HOA meeting in 2019. Both times, she'd made it clear she didn't like my property. "Your house is an eyesore," she'd said at the meeting. "It's bringing down property values on this street." I'd told her I was planning to renovate it over time. She hadn't been satisfied with that answer. Now she'd demolished it. I hung up with Mike and pulled up my bank app. Scrolled through 3 years of transactions. $85. Pinewood Estates, HOA. Automatic withdrawal. Every month. Never missed a payment. 36 consecutive payments. $3,060 total. I wasn't delinquent. Someone had falsified records to make it look like I was. I called my supervisor at the FBI. "Sir, I need emergency leave. Someone just demolished my house." There was a pause on the line. "Daniel, what?" "I'm not joking. I'm in Chicago on the Rayburn case. My HOA demolished my house while I was gone. I need to get back to Colorado immediately." "Are you telling me someone destroyed your property?" "Yes, sir, without my permission, based on what appears to be falsified records." Another pause. "Go, handle it, keep me updated." I booked a flight home that afternoon. By the time I landed in Denver, I'd already started treating this like a case. I'd spent 15 years with the FBI, 12 of those in financial crimes. I knew fraud when I saw it, and this was fraud. I drove straight to my property, or what was left of it. The house was gone, completely gone. Just a concrete foundation slab, piles of wood debris, shattered drywall, and broken fixtures scattered across the lot. A construction dumpster sat at the curb, half filled with wreckage. A yellow sign was posted near the street. "Structure demolished. Pinewood Estates, HOA. County permit number 2025-4482. Authorized by Douglas County Code Enforcement." I took photos, dozens of them, every angle, the debris, the sign, the empty lot. Mike came over from his house next door. "Daniel, man, I'm so sorry. I tried calling you, but it went to voicemail. I was in court, phone was off. They showed up with bulldozers, a crew, everything. Diane was here with her husband Robert. His company did the demo. She had a stack of paperwork. County inspector was here too. It all looked official. What time did it start? 7 this morning. By noon it was rubble. They worked fast. I looked at the wreckage. A house I'd owned for 3 years, demolished in 5 hours. Did anyone object? Did any neighbors try to stop them?" A few people asked questions, but Diane said you were notified months ago and ignored the warnings. She said the house was abandoned and you owed $9,000 in back dues. People believed her. I pulled up my phone, showed Mike my bank records. I've paid dues every month for 3 years. Auto pay, never missed a payment. Mike stared at the screen. Then how did she get a demolition permit? She lied, falsified records, and I'm going to prove it. I spent the next hour walking through the debris, documenting everything. Then I drove to the county offices. Douglas County Code Enforcement kept paper and digital records of all demolition permits. I requested a copy of permit number 2025-4482. The clerk handed me a file 20 minutes later. Permit application. Demolition of residential structure. Address: 4738 Pinewood Drive. Applicant: Diane Merrick, President, Pinewood Estates, HOA. Reason for demolition: abandoned property plus delinquent HOA assessments, $9,180 owed. Property owner notification. Certified mail sent to Daniel Rivera on November 18, 2024, December 22, 2024, January 30, 2025. No response received. County Inspector approval. Signed, February 10, 2025. I checked the certified mail tracking numbers listed on the permit application. USPS tracking showed all 3 were marked delivered, but to an address I didn't recognize. Not my rental apartment. Not my property address. Someone had sent certified mail to a fake address, claimed I'd been notified, and used that as justification for demolition. Fraud. Clear fraud. I photographed every page of the permit file, then requested copies of the HOA's supporting documents, the financial records showing my alleged delinquency. The county clerk provided a ledger submitted by Diane Merrick. Pinewood Estates HOA, delinquent accounts. Daniel Rivera, 4738 Pinewood Drive. Dues owed, $9,180. 36 months at $85 per month plus late fees. Last payment received, $0 since June 2022. Account status, delinquent. No contact with owner. I pulled out my phone, opened my bank app, and compared it to the HOA ledger. My bank showed 36 consecutive monthly payments to Pinewood Estates HOA. Their ledger showed 0 payments. Someone had doctored the HOA's financial records to make me look delinquent. And that someone was Diane Merrick. I drove to her house, 4 houses down from my demolished property. A neat 2-story colonial with professional landscaping and a 3-car garage. I knocked on the door. Diane answered. She was in her late 40s, blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, wearing yoga pants and a designer sweatshirt. She looked surprised to see me. Then she smiled, smug, satisfied. "Daniel, I heard you were out of town. You demolished my house. Your abandoned house. You owed 3 years of HOA dues. We followed proper procedures. The county approved it." I kept my voice calm, controlled, the way I'd been trained to handle suspects who thought they were smarter than me. "I've paid dues every month for 3 years. I have bank records showing automatic payments. Our records show otherwise. You were notified multiple times. You ignored every notice. I never received any notices, and I paid every month." Someone falsified the HOA records. Diane's smile didn't falter. "That's a serious accusation. Our records are maintained by our HOA management company. If you have a dispute, you can file an appeal with the board. Your board demolished my house based on fraudulent records. There's nothing to appeal. I'm suing. Take it up with the county. They approved the demolition. We're done here." She started to close the door. "Diane, one more thing." She paused. "You sent certified mail to a fake address. You falsified financial records. You committed fraud to obtain a demolition permit. That's not just a civil lawsuit. That's criminal. Her smile finally faded. Just a fraction. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm FBI, Diane. Financial Crimes Division. I investigate fraud for a living. And you just committed fraud against a federal agent. Her face went pale. I turned and walked back to my car. The next morning I met with my attorney, Sarah Kim. She'd handled my real estate purchases and lease agreements for the past 5 years. Sharp, efficient, no nonsense. I showed her the photos of the demolished house, the county permit, the falsified HOA ledger, and my bank records. Daniel, this is slam dunk illegal. They demolished your house based on false records. We sue for property destruction, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and civil rights violations. You'll win. I want more than a lawsuit. Sarah looked up from the documents. What do you mean? If Diane falsified records about my dues, what else is she falsifying? She's been HOA president for 6 years. I want to see every financial record, every contract, every vendor payment. If she's willing to commit fraud to demolish my house, she's willing to commit fraud elsewhere. You think she's embezzling? I think she's dirty, and I want to know how dirty. Sarah nodded slowly. Colorado law requires HOAs to provide full financial disclosure to members upon request. You're a member. We can request 6 years of records, budgets, expenses, contracts, bank statements. Do it. Sarah sent the request that afternoon. The HOA's attorney responded 3 days later. HOA financial records are internal matters and not subject to disclosure without board approval. Sarah replied within an hour. Colorado Revised Statutes Section 38-33.3-317 requires HOAs to provide financial records to members upon written request. Your client has 10 business days to comply, or will file a motion to compel with the court and seek sanctions. The records arrived 2 weeks later. 6 years of financial documents delivered in 4 bankers' boxes. Budgets, expense reports, vendor contracts, bank statements, check registers, invoices. I cleared my kitchen table and spread everything out. Then I did what I'd been trained to do for 15 years. I followed the money. First pattern I noticed: Robert Merritt Construction, Diane's husband's company. It appeared on 80% of the HOA's vendor contracts over the past 6 years. Annual payments to Robert Merritt Construction, 2019, $186,000. 2020, $201,000. 2021, $224,000. 2022, $238,000. 2023, $247,000. 2024, $251,000. Total, $1,347,000, paid to Diane's husband's company over 6 years. For a 120-home HOA, that was excessive. I pulled up the invoices: landscaping, irrigation repairs, fence painting, parking lot resurfacing, pool maintenance, clubhouse renovations. Then I cross-referenced the invoices with reality. I'd lived in Pinewood Estates for 3 years. I'd attended a few HOA meetings. I'd walked the neighborhood dozens of times. The landscaping was basic, mowing and seasonal planting, nothing elaborate. The pool had been resurfaced once, in 2022. Cost on the invoice, $87,000. I'd looked up comparable pool resurfacing projects online at the time. Average cost was $40,000 to $50,000 for a community pool. The clubhouse renovations listed in the 2023 invoices totaled $93,000. I'd been in the clubhouse. It looked fine, but not $93,000 in renovations fine. The numbers didn't match reality. I pulled the bank statements and tracked the payments. Every invoice from Robert Merritt Construction was paid within 7 days. Electronic transfer. No delays, no questions. Most HOAs required bids from multiple contractors for projects over $10,000. I searched the records for evidence of competitive bidding. There was none. Every contract went to Robert Merritt Construction. No bids, no comparisons. Diane was president. She approved the contracts. Her husband's company did the work, and nobody questioned it. That was a conflict of interest, and probably fraud. But I needed more. I spent the next week analyzing the records like I would analyze a case file at the bureau. I found more red flags. Phantom vendors. 3 companies appeared repeatedly in the expense reports. Summit Landscaping Services, $78,000 over 3 years. Peak Property Management, $64,000 over 2 years. Ridgeline Maintenance Solutions, $53,000 over 4 years. I ran business searches on all 3. No active business licenses in Colorado. No websites. No phone numbers that worked. Shell companies. Fake vendors. Inflated invoices. I compared Robert Merrick Construction's invoices to market rates for similar services. Fence painting. Invoice $23,000. Market rate $8,000 to $12,000. Irrigation repair. Invoice $31,000. Market rate $10,000 to $15,000. Tree trimming. Invoice $19,000. Market rate $4,000 to $7,000. Every invoice was 2 to 3 times higher than market rate. Duplicate payments. In 2022, the HOA paid Robert Merrick Construction $87,000 for pool resurfacing in June, then paid again in September. Same description, same amount. Either the pool was resurfaced twice in 3 months, or someone submitted the same invoice twice and got paid twice. I pulled up satellite images of the neighborhood from Google Earth, going back 6 years. The pool looked the same in every image. 1 resurfacing, not 2. Duplicate payment. $87,000 stolen. By the time I finished my analysis, the pattern was clear. Diane Merrick had been embezzling HOA funds for at least 4 years, probably longer. She'd used her husband's company as the primary vehicle. Inflated invoices, phantom services, duplicate payments. She'd created fake vendors and submitted fake invoices. She'd approved every fraudulent contract herself as HOA president. I estimated total embezzlement at $340,000 minimum, possibly more. Demolishing my house wasn't just about property values or getting rid of an eyesore. It was about creating chaos, distraction, noise. If the HOA was busy dealing with a demolition lawsuit, nobody would be looking at financial records. Diane had made a calculated move. Destroy the house of the one homeowner who wasn't paying attention. Claim it was for unpaid dues. Move on. She just didn't know who she was dealing with. I sat at my kitchen table, 6 years of HOA financial records spread out in front of me, and made a decision. I wasn't just suing Diane Merrick. I was investigating her. And when I was done, she wasn't going to lose a lawsuit. She was going to lose everything. Diane Merrick made one critical mistake. She demolished the house of an FBI agent who specializes in financial fraud. Now, I was coming for her. I took 3 weeks of leave from the bureau. My supervisor, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Tom Brennan, approved it without hesitation after I explained what had happened. Someone demolished your house while you were testifying on a federal case? Yes, sir, based on falsified records. And I think there's a lot more going on. Take the time you need. Document everything. If this becomes a federal matter, let me know. I spent those 3 weeks treating Diane Merrick like a case file. Every morning I woke up, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with 6 years of HOA financial records spread out in front of me. I built spreadsheets, tracked payments, cross-referenced invoices with bank statements, verified vendor information, checked business licenses, called contractors to get market rate quotes. I approached it the same way I'd approached the Rayburn case in Chicago, the CFO who'd embezzled $14 million through fake vendor contracts. Diane's scheme wasn't as sophisticated as Rayburn's, but it was the same basic structure. Create fake vendors, submit fake invoices, approve your own payments, pocket the money. By the end of week 1, I had a preliminary estimate, $340,000 embezzled over 4 years. By the end of week 2, I had a detailed breakdown of every fraudulent transaction. By the end of week 3, I had a prosecutable case. The fraud broke down into 4 categories. Category 1, inflated invoices. Robert Merrick Construction had been paid $1,347,000 over 6 years for HOA maintenance and repairs. I'd pulled comparable quotes from 3 other contractors for similar work. Market rate for the services Robert's company claimed to provide. $680,000 to $720,000. Robert had been paid roughly double the market rate for 6 years. Estimated overcharge, $640,000. But some of that could be explained by premium pricing, inefficiency, or poor negotiation by the HOA board. What couldn't be explained was the duplicate payments and phantom services. In 2022, the HOA paid Robert $87,000 for pool resurfacing in June, then paid the same invoice again in September. Same description, same amount, same invoice number. The pool had been resurfaced once, not twice. Someone had submitted the same invoice twice and gotten paid twice. Duplicate payment, $87,000. In 2023, Robert billed the HOA $43,000 for parking lot resurfacing and restriping. I'd walked that parking lot 100 times. It had never been resurfaced. The asphalt was cracked and faded, at least 10 years old. Phantom service, $43,000. In 2024, Robert billed $31,000 for irrigation system replacement, 18 zones. I'd talked to Mike Torres, my neighbor, who was on the HOA landscape committee. He'd told me the irrigation system had minor repairs in 2024, but no full replacement. I called 2 irrigation companies and asked for quotes on replacing an 18-zone system for a 120-home community. Average quote, $12,000 to $15,000. Robert had billed $31,000 for work that cost $15,000 maximum and may not have been done at all. Estimated fraud through Robert Merrick Construction, $180,000 to $200,000. Category 2, fake vendors. 3 vendors appeared repeatedly in HOA expense reports, but didn't exist as legitimate businesses. Summit Landscaping Services paid $78,000 over 3 years for seasonal planting and landscape design. No business license in Colorado, no website, no phone number, no address. I traced the payments through the HOA bank statements. All checks made payable to Summit Landscaping Services were deposited into an account at Wells Fargo. I ran the account number through federal banking databases, something I could access as an FBI agent with an active case. The account was registered to Diane Merrick. She'd created a fake landscaping company, submitted invoices to herself as HOA president, approved the payments, and deposited the checks into her personal account. Embezzlement, $78,000. Peak Property Management paid $64,000 over 2 years for HOA management consulting services. Same pattern. No legitimate business. Payment deposited into an account registered to Robert Merrick. Embezzlement, $64,000. Ridgeline Maintenance Solutions paid $53,000 over 4 years for emergency repairs and maintenance. Payments deposited into an account registered to an LLC called DR Enterprises. I pulled the LLC registration, filed in Wyoming in 2021. Registered agent, Diane Merrick. Managing member, Robert Merrick. Another shell company controlled by Diane and Robert. Embezzlement, $53,000. Total fraud through fake vendors, $195,000. Category 3, kickbacks. In 2023, the HOA hired Alpine Security Systems to install new cameras and access controls at the clubhouse and pool. Invoice, $94,000. I called Alpine Security and asked for a quote on a similar system. Their estimate, $48,000 to $52,000. The HOA had been charged nearly double. I dug deeper. Alpine Security Systems was owned by a man named Greg Holloway. I found his LinkedIn profile. He'd worked at Robert Merrick Construction from 2019 to 2022 as a project manager. Former employee, probably still friendly with Robert. Classic kickback scheme. Robert refers HOA business to his former employee. Former employee inflates the invoice. They split the overcharge. Estimated kickback, $42,000, assuming 50-50 split on a $45,000 overcharge. Category 4, personal expenses. I found several HOA checks written to vendors that had nothing to do with community maintenance. $12,000 to Desert Bloom Landscaping in Scottsdale, Arizona. Diane and Robert owned a vacation condo in Scottsdale. The landscaping was for their personal property, not the HOA. $8,400 to Premier Auto Detailing, monthly detailing services for 2 vehicles over 14 months. I pulled the invoices from HOA files. Both vehicles matched the make/model of Diane's Mercedes and Robert's BMW. $6,200 to Elevation Fitness Solutions, personal training services. The invoices listed Diane Merrick as the client. Total personal expenses, fraudulently charged to HOA, $26,600. I compiled everything into a detailed report. Total estimated embezzlement, $340,000 to $360,000 over 4 years. Then I called my supervisor. Tom, I need to talk to you about my house situation. What did you find? The HOA president who demolished my house has been embezzling funds for at least 4 years. I estimate $340,000 in fraud. Fake vendors, inflated invoices, shell companies. It's a classic embezzlement scheme. There was a pause. Daniel, that's a local civil matter, maybe local criminal prosecution if the DA is interested. But it's not federal jurisdiction unless there's a federal nexus. There is. Wire fraud. Explain. HOA funds were transferred electronically across state lines to fake vendors. Diane created a shell company in Wyoming, DR Enterprises, and submitted fake invoices. The HOA transferred funds electronically from Colorado to Wyoming accounts. That's wire fraud. Federal jurisdiction under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Another pause. Longer this time. You're sure about the interstate transfers? Positive. I pulled the bank records. Multiple wire transfers from the HOA's Colorado account to accounts in Wyoming, Arizona, and Nevada. All controlled by Diane or Robert. All based on fraudulent invoices. And you have documentation? 6 years of financial records, bank statements, invoices, vendor verification, market rate comparisons, business license searches, and account ownership records. I've built the case. It's prosecutable. Tom was quiet for a moment. How much time have you put into this? 3 weeks, full time. You analyzed 6 years of HOA records in 3 weeks? I'm motivated. They demolished my house. Tom laughed, a short, sharp laugh. Daniel, you're telling me the HOA president demolished your house, so you investigated her for embezzlement and discovered $340,000 in federal wire fraud? Yes, sir. And you want to open a case? I want to open a preliminary investigation. If the evidence supports prosecution, I want to take it to the U.S. attorney. You realize you're a victim in this case. You can't be the case agent. I'm a victim of the property destruction, not the embezzlement. The embezzlement victims are the other 119 HOA members. I'm a witness and a complainant, but not a direct victim of the wire fraud. That's a thin line. It's a defensible line. And if you want to assign another agent as lead, I'm fine with that. But I want to be involved. I know this case better than anyone. Tom was quiet again. Send me the report. I'll review it and discuss with the ASAC. If there's enough for a preliminary investigation, we'll open it. But Daniel, if this goes forward, you need to stay objective. Don't let personal motivation compromise the case. Understood. I sent the report that afternoon. 42 pages. Every fraudulent transaction documented. Every piece of evidence cited. Every federal statute violated. It read like a prosecution memo because that's exactly what it was. 2 days later, Tom called me back. We're opening a preliminary investigation. Case number FC-2025-0847. Wire fraud, embezzlement of HOA funds, conspiracy. You're assigned as case agent, but I'm assigning Special Agent Laura Hernandez as co-case agent to maintain objectivity. She'll handle interviews where you have a conflict. That works. Good, because this needs to be clean. If we're prosecuting an HOA president for demolishing an FBI agent's house and embezzling funds, the defense is going to scream retaliation. We need an airtight case. It's airtight. Then prove it. I met with Laura Hernandez the next day. She was a 10-year veteran, Financial Crimes Division, sharp and thorough. I walked her through the entire case, every fraudulent transaction, every piece of evidence. She reviewed my analysis for 2 hours, then looked up. This is solid work, Daniel. really solid. If half of this holds up under scrutiny, we've got a prosecutable wire fraud case. It'll hold up. Then let's build it. We spent the next week organizing the evidence for presentation to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Financial records, bank statements, invoices, business license searches, vendor interviews, market rate comparisons. We interviewed 3 contractors who provided quotes showing Robert Merrick Construction's invoices were inflated by 80 to 120%. We interviewed the HOA's former treasurer, who'd served from 2019 to 2021. She told us Diane had pressured her to approve contracts without competitive bidding. Diane said her husband's company was reliable, and we didn't need to waste time getting multiple bids. I pushed back a few times, but she overruled me. Eventually, I resigned because I didn't want to be part of it. We traced the shell company accounts. Summit Landscaping Services deposited checks into Diane's personal account. Peak Property Management deposited checks into Robert's account. DR Enterprises, the Wyoming LLC, deposited checks into a joint account controlled by both. We pulled wire transfer records showing electronic payments from the HOA's Colorado Bank to accounts in Wyoming, Arizona, and Nevada. Interstate commerce, wire fraud, federal jurisdiction. Laura and I presented the case to Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Osman 3 weeks after opening the investigation. He reviewed the evidence for 90 minutes, asking detailed questions about every transaction. Finally, he looked up. This is one of the cleanest financial fraud cases I've seen in 2 years. You've documented everything. The wire fraud statute applies. We have interstate transfers based on fraudulent invoices. We have victims, 119 HOA members who've been paying dues that were embezzled. We have clear intent. This is prosecutable. What's next? Laura asked. We open a grand jury investigation. I'll start drafting subpoenas for bank records, business records, and email accounts. We'll need to interview Diane and Robert, probably through their attorneys once they lawyer up. And we'll need search warrants for their home, business, and any storage locations where they might have kept records. He looked at me. Agent Rivera, I understand your house was demolished by the target of this investigation. Correct. That's going to come up at trial. Defense will argue this is a vindictive prosecution driven by personal animus. The evidence speaks for itself. I didn't create $340,000 in fraudulent transactions. Diane did. I agree, but we need to be prepared for that argument. Make sure everything you do in this case is by the book. No shortcuts, no questionable tactics. Clean case, clean prosecution. Understood, Michael nodded. Good, then let's take down an HOA president. 2 weeks later, we had grand jury subpoenas for every bank account controlled by Diane Merrick, Robert Merrick, and their shell companies. We had subpoenas for Robert Merrick Construction's business records. We had subpoenas for emails from Diane's HOA account and personal accounts. And we had a search warrant for their home. The evidence was mounting. Diane Merrick had demolished my house, thinking I was just another absent homeowner who wouldn't fight back. She didn't know I was an FBI agent. And she definitely didn't know I specialized in financial fraud. Now she was about to find out. The search warrant was approved on March 18, 2025. Federal Magistrate Judge Patricia Lawson reviewed our 67-page affidavit documenting the wire fraud scheme and signed the warrant at 4:47 p.m. We had authorization to search 3 locations: Diane and Robert Merrick's residence at 4702 Pinewood Drive, Robert Merrick Construction's business office at 2840 Industrial Parkway, the Pinewood Estates HOA office at the Community Clubhouse. We were authorized to seize computers, phones, financial records, contracts, invoices, bank statements, and any documents related to HOA finances or Robert Merrick Construction's dealings with the HOA. Laura Hernandez and I coordinated the execution with our evidence response team. We scheduled it for 7 a.m. on March 21st, a Thursday morning, early enough to catch Diane and Robert at home before they left for the day. The night before, I reviewed the plan with Laura and our team. We hit all 3 locations simultaneously. Team 1 takes the residence. That's the priority. Team 2 takes the business office. Team 3 takes the HOA office. We move fast, secure all electronics immediately, and document everything. Laura looked at me. Daniel, you're on Team 1, but you stay back during initial contact. Let me handle Diane and Robert. You step in after we've secured the scene. Agreed. I understood why. If I was the first person Diane saw, she'd immediately claim this was retaliation for the house demolition. We needed clean optics. The next morning, 6 FBI vehicles pulled up to Diane and Robert's house at exactly 7 a.m. Laura knocked on the door. Loud. Authoritative. FBI, we have a search warrant. 30 seconds passed. I could see movement through the frosted glass window next to the door. The door opened. Robert Merrick stood there in a t-shirt and sweatpants, coffee mug in hand, looking confused. What's going on? Laura held up the warrant. FBI, we have a federal search warrant for this residence. Step outside, please. A search warrant? For what? Step outside, sir. Now. Robert's confusion turned to alarm. He set down his coffee mug and stepped onto the front porch. Diane, he called back into the house. Diane, get out here. Diane appeared a moment later, wearing a robe, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked at the 6 FBI agents on her lawn and went pale. What is this about? Laura handed her the warrant. We're executing a federal search warrant related to financial fraud involving Pinewood Estates, HOA. You need to step outside while we search the residence. Diane's hands shook as she took the warrant. She skimmed the first page, then looked up at Laura. Financial fraud? This is ridiculous. There's been no fraud. This is about Daniel Rivera, isn't it? He's retaliating because we demolished his abandoned house. That's when I stepped forward. I'd been standing behind 2 other agents, out of Diane's immediate line of sight. I moved to the front, pulled out my credentials, and held them up. Special Agent Daniel Rivera, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Diane stared at me. Her face went from pale to white. You're FBI? 15 years. I specialize in financial fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud, the kinds of crimes you've been committing for the past 4 years. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Robert looked back and forth between us. What the hell is going on? I kept my eyes on Diane. You demolished my house thinking I was just another absentee homeowner who wouldn't fight back. You falsified records, committed fraud to obtain a demolition permit, and tried to make me disappear. What you didn't know is that I investigate financial crimes for a living, and when I started looking into your HOA finances, I found $340,000 in embezzlement. That's insane. I haven't embezzled anything. Summit Landscaping Services, fake vendor. You created it, submitted fake invoices, and deposited $78,000 into your personal account. Peak Property Management, another fake vendor. Robert deposited $64,000. DR Enterprises, your Wyoming shell company, $53,000. Inflated invoices to Robert's construction company. Duplicate payments for pool resurfacing. Phantom services that were never performed. I've documented every fraudulent transaction over 6 years. Diane's legs seemed to buckle slightly. Robert grabbed her arm to steady her. You're not being arrested today, Mrs. Merrick, I said, but you will be. We're executing this search warrant to collect additional evidence. When we're done building the case, you and your husband will be indicted on federal wire fraud charges. You're looking at 8 to 10 years in federal prison. Robert's face had gone red. You can't just... This is harassment. You're retaliating because of the house. Laura stepped in. Mr. Merrick, this investigation is based on evidence of financial crimes. The U.S. Attorney's Office has reviewed the case and authorized this warrant. You and your wife need to wait outside while we execute the search. If you interfere, you'll be arrested for obstruction. 4 agents entered the house. I stayed outside with Laura, Diane, and Robert. Diane had slumped onto the front steps, head in her hands. Robert stood next to her, fists clenched, looking like he wanted to hit something. How long have you known? Diane asked quietly, not looking up. That you embezzled HOA funds? 3 weeks. I analyzed 6 years of financial records after you demolished my house. You spent 3 weeks analyzing HOA records? I spent 3 weeks building a federal case against you. Fake vendors, inflated invoices, wire transfers across state lines. It's textbook wire fraud. She finally looked up at me. Her eyes were red, but I couldn't tell if it was from anger or fear. All of this because we demolished your house? No. All of this because you committed $340,000 in financial fraud and thought you could get away with it. Demolishing my house was just the mistake that made me look closely at your finances. We followed proper procedures for the demolition. You falsified HOA records to make me look delinquent. You sent certified mail to fake addresses to claim I'd been notified. You lied to the county to get a demolition permit. That's fraud. And when I started investigating why you'd commit fraud over a house demolition, I found 4 years of embezzlement. Robert took a step toward me. You son of a... Laura moved between us. Mr. Merrick, back up. Now. Robert stopped, breathing hard, glaring at me. I kept my voice calm. The evidence is overwhelming. We have bank records showing fake vendor payments deposited into your accounts. We have inflated invoices from your construction company charging double the market rate. We have duplicate payments for work that was done once. We have phantom services that were never performed. The U.S. attorney has reviewed everything. This isn't retaliation, this is prosecution. An agent appeared at the door. We're ready to start bringing out evidence. Over the next 90 minutes, the evidence response team carried out boxes of documents, 2 desktop computers, 3 laptops, 4 cell phones, and a filing cabinet full of financial records. Diane and Robert sat on their front porch the entire time, watching their lives get dismantled, box by box. Neighbors started coming out, standing on their lawns, watching, phones out, taking photos and video. Mike Torres, my neighbor, walked over. Daniel? What's happening? FBI is executing a search warrant, financial fraud investigation. Mike looked at Diane and Robert, then back at me. This is about the HOA? This is about $340,000 in embezzled funds over 4 years. Mike's eyes went wide. Holy shit. By 9:30 a.m., we'd cleared the house. 17 boxes of evidence loaded into FBI vehicles. Laura handed Diane a receipt listing everything we'd seized. You'll want to get an attorney, Mrs. Merrick, a federal criminal defense attorney. The U.S. Attorney's Office will be contacting you. Diane took the receipt with shaking hands. She didn't say anything. I looked at her one last time. You demolished my house because you thought I was powerless. You thought I'd just accept it and go away. You were wrong. Then I walked to my vehicle and drove to the next location. Robert Merrick Construction's office was a small building in an industrial park on the south side of town. Team 2 had already executed the warrant by the time I arrived. They'd seized 4 more computers, another filing cabinet full of contracts and invoices, and 3 boxes of financial records. The office manager, a woman in her 50s named Linda, stood outside looking bewildered. I don't understand what's happening. Robert's company is legitimate. We do good work. Laura spoke with her briefly. We're investigating financial fraud related to contracts with Pinewood Estates HOA. Your company has been paid over $1.3 million by the HOA in 6 years. We're verifying that the services billed were actually performed. Linda's expression shifted from bewildered to worried. I just process the invoices Robert gives me. I don't verify the work. That's fine. We're not investigating you, but we'll need to speak with you later as a witness. Linda nodded, still looking shaken. The third location, the HOA office at the Pinewood Estates clubhouse, was the smallest operation. Team 3 had seized 2 computers, the HOA's financial files for the past 8 years, and a box of contracts and correspondence. The HOA's part-time office administrator, a man named Phil, had cooperated fully. I've only been working here 6 months, he told the agents. I answer phones and process maintenance requests. Diane handles all the financial stuff. I don't even have access to the bank accounts. By noon, all 3 search warrants had been executed. We transported everything back to the FBI field office and logged it into evidence. 17 boxes from the residence, 4 computers, 7 phones, 6 boxes from Robert Merrick Construction, 4 computers, 2 boxes from the HOA office, 2 computers. Laura and I spent the afternoon organizing the evidence and assigning forensic analysis tasks. FBI forensic accountants would review all financial records. FBI computer forensics would analyze all computers and phones for emails, documents, and communications related to the fraud. It would take weeks to process everything, but we already had enough evidence to prosecute. This was just building an even stronger case. That evening, my attorney Sarah Kim called me. "Daniel, I just heard from the HOA's attorney. Diane Merrick resigned as president effective immediately. The board is holding an emergency meeting tomorrow night to elect a new president and discuss financial irregularities." That was fast. She knows she's done. FBI search warrant executed at her home, her husband's business, and the HOA office. Everyone in the neighborhood saw it. She can't stay in that position. Good. There's something else. The HOA's attorney asked if you'd be willing to meet with the new board after they're elected. They want to understand the scope of the financial issues. Tell them I'll meet with them after the criminal case is resolved. I don't want to compromise the investigation. Understood. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, looking at the case file I'd built over the past 6 weeks. From a demolished house to a federal wire fraud investigation. Diane Merrick had thought she was untouchable. HOA president for 6 years. Her husband's company getting every contract. Nobody questioning her. Nobody pushing back. Until she demolished the house of an FBI agent. Now, her life was collapsing. Search warrants executed. Computers seized. Financial records in FBI custody. And the worst part for Diane? We were just getting started. The FBI's forensic accounting team took 3 weeks to process the evidence from the search warrants. 3 weeks of analyzing bank statements, invoices, contracts, emails, and financial records spanning 6 years. I checked in with the team lead, senior forensic accountant Jennifer Walsh, every few days. "We're finding everything you documented in your initial report, plus more," she told me during week 2. "This isn't just embezzlement, it's systematic, organized fraud that went on for years." By April 15th, Jennifer's team had completed their analysis. Laura Hernandez and I met with her in a conference room at the FBI field office. She had a 94-page forensic accounting report laid out on the table. "Let me walk you through what we found," Jennifer said, opening the report. Agent Rivera's initial analysis identified approximately $340,000 in fraudulent transactions. Our detailed forensic review confirms that number and adds additional evidence. She pulled up a spreadsheet on the conference room screen. "We analyzed every payment made by Pinewood Estates HOA to Robert Merrick Construction over 6 years. Total payments, $1,347,000. We cross-referenced those payments with work orders, project completion records, and market rate comparisons from 3 independent contractors. The spreadsheet showed line-by-line breakdowns. Our conclusion: approximately $680,000 of that $1.3 million represents legitimate work performed at reasonable market rates. The remaining $667,000 is either inflated billing, duplicate payments, or phantom services that were never performed." Laura leaned forward. "Wait, you're saying the fraud through Robert's company alone is $667,000? "Correct. Agent Rivera's initial estimate was conservative because he focused on the most obvious fraudulent transactions. When we analyzed every invoice in detail, we found systematic overbilling across the entire 6-year period." Jennifer pulled up another document. "Here are the categories of fraud we identified through Robert Merrick Construction. Inflated invoices, $412,000. Robert's company consistently billed 80 to 150% above market rate for services. Fence painting billed at $23,000 when market rate is $10,000. Irrigation repairs billed at $31,000 when market rate is $14,000. Tree trimming billed at $19,000 when market rate is $6,000. Over 6 years, this systematic overbilling totals $412,000. Duplicate payments, $174,000. We found 7 instances of duplicate payments for the same work. The pool resurfacing in 2022 that Agent Rivera identified, $87,000 paid twice, was the largest, but there were 6 others. Parking lot restriping paid twice in 2021, $31,000. Clubhouse HVAC repair paid twice in 2023, $28,000. The pattern is consistent. Submit an invoice, get paid, wait 3 to 6 months, submit the exact same invoice with a slightly different date, get paid again. Phantom services, $81,000. We identified multiple invoices for work that was never performed. The parking lot resurfacing in 2023 for $43,000. Our site inspection confirmed the parking lot has not been resurfaced in at least 10 years. Fence replacement in 2024 for $38,000. The fences are original to the community, installed in 2014, never replaced. These are completely fabricated invoices for work that never happened. I looked at the numbers. $667,000 through Robert's company alone. Nearly double my initial estimate. Jennifer continued. Now let's look at the shell companies. She pulled up another spreadsheet. Agent Rivera identified 3 fake vendors: Summit Landscaping Services, Peak Property Management, and Ridgeline Maintenance Solutions. We confirmed all 3 are shell companies with no legitimate business operations. Summit Landscaping Services, $78,000. All payments deposited directly into Diane Merrick's personal checking account at Wells Fargo. We analyzed her bank statements. The deposits from Summit Landscaping were immediately used for personal expenses, mortgage payments, credit card bills, vacation expenses, car payments. None of the money went to business expenses because there was no business. Peak Property Management, $64,000. All payments deposited into Robert Merrick's personal account at Chase. Same pattern, immediate personal use, mortgage, cars, personal expenses. Ridgeline Maintenance Solutions, $53,000. This was the Wyoming LLC, DR Enterprises. Payments deposited into a joint account controlled by both Diane and Robert. We traced the funds. 40% went to mortgage payments on their Scottsdale vacation condo. 60% was withdrawn as cash over time. Jennifer pulled up another document. Total confirmed embezzlement through shell companies, $195,000. Laura was taking notes. So we have $667,000 through Robert's company, plus $195,000 through shell companies. That's $862,000 total. Correct. But there's more. Jennifer pulled up email records. The computer forensics team analyzed emails from Diane's HOA account, her personal account, and Robert's business account. We found communications that establish intent and coordination. She displayed an email on the screen. From Diane Merrick to Robert Merrick. Date March 14th, 2022. Subject Pool invoice. Submit the pool resurfacing invoice again in September. Use a different date. Nobody checks the records that closely. We need the cash for the Scottsdale condo down payment. Laura stared at the email. They documented their own fraud. Multiple times, Jennifer said. We found 17 emails between Diane and Robert discussing inflated invoices, fake vendors, and phantom services. Here's another one. She pulled up a second email. From Robert Merrick to Diane Merrick. Date June 8th, 2023. Subject Parking lot. I'm not actually resurfacing the parking lot. Just bill it and we'll split the $43,000. Nobody will notice. From Diane Merrick to Robert Merrick. Date June 8th, 2023. Subject RE Parking lot. Approved. Submit the invoice next week. I shook my head. They were brazen. They thought they were untouchable, Jennifer said. Diane controlled the HOA finances. Robert's company did most of the work. Nobody questioned them. They got comfortable. Laura looked at the report. What about wire fraud? Do we have interstate transfers? Jennifer nodded. Confirmed. 23 wire transfers from the HOA's Colorado bank account to accounts in Wyoming, Arizona, and Nevada. Total value, $248,000. All based on fraudulent invoices. All transferred electronically across state lines. That's wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. She pulled up a map showing the transfer paths. The Wyoming LLC, DR Enterprises, received $53,000 in wire transfers. The Scottsdale Landscaping Company Diane used for her personal vacation condo, Desert Bloom Landscaping, received $12,000 wired from the HOA account, fraudulently billed as Community Landscaping. The pattern is clear and documented. Laura made a note. That locks in federal jurisdiction. Absolutely, Jennifer confirmed. I looked at the total numbers on the spreadsheet. So final confirmed embezzlement is $862,000? Not quite. There's one more thing. Jennifer pulled up a different set of documents. During the search, we seized records from the HOA office that included lien filings. We discovered that Diane had filed fraudulent liens against 6 other homeowners besides Agent Rivera. She displayed a list of names and addresses. All 6 homeowners had properties Diane wanted to purchase for investment purposes. All 6 were filed with the county as delinquent on HOA dues. But when we cross-referenced the HOA's own bank records with the homeowners' payment records, we found that 5 of the 6 had paid their dues in full. Diane falsified the delinquency records. Laura looked up sharply. She did to 6 other people what she did to Daniel? Not exactly. She didn't demolish their houses, but she filed liens claiming they owed money they didn't owe, attempting to cloud their property titles and pressure them into selling. Jennifer pulled up one example. Thomas and Rachel Brennan at 4521 Pinewood Drive. Diane filed a lien in November 2023, claiming $4,200 in delinquent dues. She then sent them a letter offering to resolve the lien by purchasing their property for $285,000, about $40,000 below market value. The Brennans paid an attorney $3,500 to fight the lien. It was eventually removed, but they never recovered their legal fees. How much did she try to extract through fraudulent liens? Total claims across 6 homeowners, $31,800. 3 of them paid partial settlements to avoid legal fees. Diane collected $14,200 through fraudulent lien claims. I felt my jaw tighten. It wasn't just me. Diane had been targeting homeowners across the community for years. Jennifer closed the report. Final numbers, total confirmed fraud, $876,200 over 6 years. Wire fraud confirmed through 23 interstate electronic transfers, totaling $248,000. Documentary evidence includes emails showing intent and coordination. We have bank records, invoices, contracts, communications, and witness statements. This is a prosecutable case. Laura and I walked out of the meeting with the 94-page forensic report. This is beyond what we expected, Laura said. We thought we had $340,000. We have $876,000. Diane and Robert got greedy. They started small, got comfortable, and escalated. Classic embezzlement pattern. And they documented everything in emails. Arrogance. They thought nobody would ever look. We presented the forensic report to Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Osman the next day. He read through the executive summary, reviewed the key emails, and examined the wire transfer documentation. Then he looked up. This is one of the strongest financial fraud cases I've handled in 5 years. You have documentary evidence of intent. You have bank records showing exactly where the money went. You have victims, 119 HOA members who paid dues that were embezzled, plus 6 homeowners who were targeted with fraudulent liens. You have wire fraud with interstate transfers. This is a slam dunk. What's the timeline for prosecution? Laura asked. I'm presenting this to the grand jury next week. We'll get indictments for Diane and Robert on wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and making false statements to government officials, the fraudulent lien filings with the county. I'm recommending 8 to 10 years for Diane, 6 to 8 years for Robert, and full restitution to the HOA and affected homeowners. What about Daniel's house? Laura asked. The demolition. That's trickier. The demolition was carried out under a county permit, so it has a veneer of legality, even though it was based on fraud. We can include it in the restitution calculation. Destruction of property valued at approximately $127,000, based on the market value at the time. But the primary charges are wire fraud and conspiracy. I nodded. I'm fine with that. I want them prosecuted for the systematic fraud, not just what they did to me. Michael closed the report. Good, because that's the story we're telling. Diane and Robert Merrick embezzled $876,000 from their neighbors over 6 years. They created fake companies, submitted fake invoices, billed for work that was never done, and fraudulently targeted homeowners who wouldn't sell them property. The fact that one of their victims happened to be an FBI agent who uncovered the scheme is just irony. He looked at me. Daniel, the defense is going to argue this is vindictive prosecution. They'll say you're retaliating for the house demolition. The evidence speaks for itself. I didn't create $876,000 in fraudulent transactions. They did. I agree, but be prepared for that narrative at trial. I will. Michael stood. I'll draft the indictment this week. Grand jury meets Thursday. If everything goes as expected, Diane and Robert Merrick will be indicted by Friday. Laura and I left the U.S. Attorney's office. It's really happening, she said. It was always going to happen. The evidence was there from the beginning. Still, going from a demolished house to federal indictments in 2 months, that's fast. I thought about the past 2 months, discovering my house was demolished, analyzing 6 years of financial records, building a federal case, executing search warrants, forensic accounting review. Diane demolished my house, thinking I was powerless. She thought I'd sue, maybe get a settlement, and go away. She didn't know I was FBI, and she definitely didn't know I'd investigate her. She knows now. Yeah, she does. 3 days later, the grand jury returned indictments. Diane Merrick, wire fraud, 18 counts. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, making false statements to government officials, 7 counts. Robert Merrick, wire fraud, 12 counts. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Arrest warrants were issued. Diane and Robert would be arrested within 48 hours, and their entire world was about to collapse. The arrests were scheduled for 6 a.m. on April 24, 2025. Laura Hernandez and I sat in an FBI surveillance van parked 2 blocks from Diane and Robert Merrick's house. We weren't participating in the arrest. Protocol required that since I was a victim in the case, but we were authorized to observe. 4 FBI vehicles approached the house at exactly 6 a.m. 8 agents, 2 U.S. Marshals, standard procedure for federal arrests. Special Agent Tom Brennan, my supervisor, led the team. He knocked on the door. FBI, federal arrest warrant, open the door. 30 seconds passed. Then the door opened. Robert stood there in pajama pants and a t-shirt, looking like he hadn't slept in days. We've been expecting you, he said quietly. Tom held up the arrest warrant. Robert Merrick, you're under arrest for wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Robert complied without resistance. An agent cuffed him. Where's Diane? Tom asked. Upstairs. Bedroom. 2 agents went inside. A minute later, they emerged with Diane. She was dressed, jeans, a sweater, sneakers, like she'd been waiting. Her face was pale, her eyes red. Tom read her rights. Diane Merrick, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and making false statements to government officials. You have the right to remain silent. Diane didn't say anything. She just stared at the ground as an agent cuffed her hands behind her back. They were led to separate vehicles. As Robert was being placed in the back of an FBI SUV, he looked around the neighborhood. Several neighbors had come out of their houses, watching. Mike Torres, Susan Chen, the Hendersons from across the street, the Patels from 2 doors down, all of them standing on their lawns, watching the HOA president and her husband get arrested by the FBI. Robert's face flushed red. Shame, anger, humiliation. Diane kept her head down the entire time, never looked up, never acknowledged the neighbors. The vehicles pulled away at 6:14 a.m. Laura and I followed in the surveillance van. How do you feel? Laura asked. I thought about it. Satisfied. Not happy exactly, but satisfied that the system worked. You did more than let the system work. You built this case. They built it. I just documented what they'd already done. Diane and Robert were processed at the Federal Detention Center in Denver. Arraignment was scheduled for that afternoon. At 2 p.m., they appeared before Magistrate Judge Patricia Lawson, the same judge who'd signed our search warrant. Both had attorneys. Diane had hired Marcus Tillman, a high-profile federal defense attorney from Denver. Robert had hired Catherine Voss, equally experienced. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Osman presented the charges and requested detention pending trial. Your Honor, the defendants are charged with 18 and 12 counts of wire fraud respectively, conspiracy, and making false statements to government officials. They embezzled $876,000 from their homeowners association over 6 years. They pose a flight risk. They own a vacation property in Arizona, and have significant financial resources hidden in shell companies. The government requests they be held without bond. Marcus Tillman stood. Your Honor, my client Diane Merrick has lived in Colorado for 22 years. She has deep ties to the community. She's not a flight risk. We request release on bond with electronic monitoring. Judge Lawson reviewed the indictment. The charges are serious. The evidence presented in the indictment shows systematic fraud over multiple years. However, both defendants surrendered peacefully and have no prior criminal history. I'm setting bond at $250,000 for Mrs. Merrick and $200,000 for Mr. Merrick. Both will be subject to electronic monitoring, travel restrictions, and must surrender their passports. Bond was posted by the end of the day. Diane and Robert were released with ankle monitors. The trial was scheduled for September 8, 2025, 4.5 months later. During those months, the case dominated local news. FBI arrests HOA president on federal fraud charges. Pinewood Estates HOA president allegedly embezzled $876,000. Federal trial set for former HOA president accused of demolishing FBI agent's house. The last headline made me wince. That wasn't the story. The story was the systematic embezzlement. But the media loved the narrative of an HOA president unknowingly demolishing an FBI agent's house. In July, Diane's attorney filed a motion to dismiss, arguing vindictive prosecution. The charges against Mrs. Merrick are retaliatory in nature, brought by an FBI agent seeking revenge for the lawful demolition of his property. The government has failed to demonstrate that this case merits federal prosecution rather than state-level civil proceedings. Michael Osmond filed a response. The government's case is based on $876,000 in documented fraud, 23 wire transfers across state lines, and systematic embezzlement spanning 6 years. The fact that one victim is an FBI agent is incidental to the overwhelming evidence of wire fraud. The defendant's argument amounts to claiming that FBI agents cannot be victims of federal crimes, a proposition unsupported by law. Judge Kenneth Morrison, who'd been assigned the trial, denied the motion to dismiss. The indictment is supported by substantial evidence of wire fraud and conspiracy. The defendant's assertion of vindictive prosecution is not supported by the record. Motion denied. Trial began on September 8, 2025. I sat in the gallery, wearing a suit, no badge visible. Just another witness waiting to testify. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors from Pinewood Estates, local reporters, other HOA board members. Michael Osmond gave the opening statement for the government. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about trust and betrayal. For 6 years, Diane and Robert Merrick held positions of trust in their community. Diane was HOA president. Robert's company provided maintenance and construction services. The 119 families in Pinewood Estates trusted them to manage their money responsibly. He walked to the jury box. That trust was violated. Over 6 years, the defendants embezzled $876,000 through a systematic scheme. They created fake companies with fake names and submitted fake invoices. They inflated real invoices, charging 2 to 3 times the market rate for services. They billed for work that was never performed. They submitted the same invoice twice and got paid twice. And when they were caught, they tried to claim it was all bookkeeping errors. He pointed to the evidence table, stacked with boxes of documents. But the evidence will show this was no error. This was deliberate, calculated fraud. You'll see emails between the defendants discussing how to inflate invoices and avoid detection. You'll see bank records showing exactly where the stolen money went. Mortgage payments, car payments, vacation properties. You'll see fake companies that existed only on paper, created solely to funnel HOA money into the defendants' pockets. He paused. The defendants thought they were untouchable. They thought nobody was watching. They were wrong. And now, they'll face the consequences. Marcus Tillman gave the opening statement for Diane's defense. Ladies and gentlemen, my client Diane Merrick made mistakes. She'll be the first to admit that. Managing HOA finances is complex. Hundreds of transactions, dozens of vendors, thousands of invoices over 6 years. Yes, there were errors. Yes, some invoices were higher than they should have been. Yes, some payments were duplicated. He walked toward the jury. But errors are not crimes. Mistakes are not fraud. The government wants you to believe my client masterminded an elaborate embezzlement scheme. The truth is far simpler. She was overwhelmed, disorganized, and made poor decisions. But she never intended to steal from her neighbors. She never intended to commit fraud. An intention is what separates a crime from a mistake. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The government called 27 witnesses. Jennifer Walsh, the FBI forensic accountant, walked the jury through every fraudulent transaction. Fake vendors, inflated invoices, duplicate payments, phantom services. 3 independent contractors testified about market rates, showing that Robert's company had charged 80 to 150% above standard prices. 5 homeowners testified about the fraudulent liens Diane had filed against their properties. Thomas Brennan, one of the lien victims, was particularly compelling. She filed a lien claiming I owed $4,200 in HOA dues. I'd paid every month for 8 years, never missed a payment. But suddenly there's a lien on my property, and I can't refinance my mortgage. I had to hire an attorney, pay $3,500, and fight it for 6 months. When it was finally removed, Diane never apologized, never explained, just said it was a clerical error. Laura Hernandez testified about the FBI investigation, the search warrants, and the evidence seized. On day 8, I was called to testify. Michael Osman walked me through my background. FBI agent, 15 years, Financial Crimes Division. Agent Rivera, how did you become aware of the fraud at Pinewood Estates HOA? My house was demolished while I was on assignment in Chicago. When I investigated why, I discovered the HOA had falsified records claiming I was delinquent on dues. That led me to request full HOA financial records. When I reviewed those records, I found evidence of systematic embezzlement. What did you find? Fake vendors, inflated invoices, duplicate payments, phantom services. Over 6 years, I identified approximately $340,000 in probable fraud. The FBI's forensic accounting team later confirmed $876,000. Did you know Diane Merrick before your house was demolished? I'd met her twice. Once when I bought the property in 2018, and once at an HOA meeting in 2019. Did you have any personal conflict with her? No, I didn't know her well enough to have a conflict. Marcus Tillman cross-examined me. Agent Rivera, isn't it true that you were angry when your house was demolished? I was upset, yes. Upset enough to spend 3 weeks analyzing 6 years of HOA records, looking for anything you could use against Mrs. Merrick? I spent 3 weeks analyzing records because I suspected fraud. The demolition was based on falsified financial records. If she falsified my records, I wanted to know what else she'd falsified. So this investigation was motivated by personal revenge? No, it was motivated by evidence of fraud. You built this entire case because you wanted to punish Mrs. Merrick for demolishing your house. I built this case because she embezzled $876,000 from 119 families. The evidence speaks for itself. Tillman tried several more times to paint me as vindictive, but Michael objected repeatedly, and Judge Morrison sustained most of them. The most damaging evidence came on day 12. Michael presented emails between Diane and Robert. The email about submitting the pool invoice twice. The email about billing for parking lot resurfacing that was never performed. The email about splitting the $43,000. Marcus Tillman tried to argue the emails were taken out of context, but the context was clear. The defense called only 3 witnesses. An accountant who testified that HOA bookkeeping is prone to errors. A former board member who said Diane worked hard and meant well. Robert's office manager, Linda, who said she never saw any indication of fraud. None of them addressed the core evidence, the fake companies, the inflated invoices, the emails discussing fraud. Diane and Robert didn't testify. Their attorneys advised against it. Closing arguments happened on day 18. Michael Osman laid out the case methodically. Every fraudulent transaction, every fake vendor, every email showing intent. The defendants want you to believe this was all mistakes, but mistakes don't create fake companies. Mistakes don't send emails discussing how to avoid detection. Mistakes don't systematically inflate invoices for 6 years. This was fraud. Deliberate, calculated, systematic fraud. Marcus Tillman made a final plea. My client made errors in judgment. She should have been more careful. She should have exercised better oversight. But she's not a criminal. She's a woman who got overwhelmed and made mistakes. Don't send her to federal prison for being disorganized. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. On September 29, 2025, they returned verdicts. Diane Merrick, guilty on all counts. 18 counts of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 7 counts of making false statements to government officials. Robert Merrick, guilty on all counts. 12 counts of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Diane's face crumpled. She started crying silently. Robert stared straight ahead, expressionless. Sentencing was scheduled for December 10, 2025. At sentencing, Michael Osmond requested maximum sentences. Your Honor, the defendants stole $876,000 from their neighbors over 6 years. They showed no remorse. They attempted to cover up their crimes by filing fraudulent liens against homeowners who questioned them. They demolished an FBI agent's house to distract from their fraud. This was systematic, calculated theft. The government requests 8 years for Mrs. Merrick and 6 years for Mr. Merrick, plus full restitution. Judge Morrison reviewed the pre-sentencing reports. Then he looked at Diane and Robert. You held positions of trust in your community. You were elected by your neighbors to manage their money responsibly. Instead, you stole from them. You created fake companies. You submitted fake invoices. You billed for work that was never done. And when you were caught, you tried to claim it was all mistakes. He paused. But the evidence is overwhelming. The emails alone prove intent. This was not disorganization. This was theft. He issued the sentences. Diane Merrick, you are sentenced to 96 months, 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $876,200 to Pinewood Estates HOA and $127,000 to Daniel Rivera for the destruction of his property. Total restitution, $1,003,200. Diane broke down, sobbing. Robert Merrick, you are sentenced to 60 months, 5 years, in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are jointly and severally liable for the restitution amount of $1,003,200. Robert closed his eyes. You will both report to federal prison within 30 days. The judge banged his gavel. It was over. I walked out of the courtroom and stood in the hallway. Laura found me a few minutes later. How do you feel? Justice was done. 8 years for Diane, 5 for Robert. Full restitution. They earned it. She nodded. They did. We walked out of the courthouse together. Outside, reporters were waiting. Agent Rivera, do you have a statement? I stopped and looked at the cameras. Diane and Robert Merrick stole $876,000 from their neighbors over 6 years. They were convicted by a jury, and today they were sentenced to federal prison. Justice was served. That's all I have to say. I walked to my car and drove home. Diane and Robert Merrick had demolished my house thinking I was powerless. Now, they were going to federal prison for 8 and 5 years. Sometimes justice takes time, but it always comes. 1 year after Diane and Robert Merrick were sentenced to federal prison, I stood in front of my rebuilt house and smiled. It was beautiful. 1,800 square feet, modern design, open floor plan, high-end finishes, energy-efficient windows, professional landscaping. Nothing like the 1,200 square foot fixer-upper Diane had demolished. Construction had cost $180,000. Insurance covered $40,000. Restitution payments from Diane and Robert covered another $127,000. I'd paid the remaining $13,000 out of pocket. So in the end, Diane had done me a favor. She'd demolished my old run-down house and, through her criminal restitution, helped me build a much nicer one. The irony wasn't lost on me. Construction had taken 7 months. I'd hired a different contractor, obviously not Robert Merrick Construction, a company out of Boulder called Summit Builders, no relation to Diane's fake Summit Landscaping Services. They'd done excellent work. The house was move-in ready as of November 2025. I'd moved in 2 weeks ago. The neighborhood had changed significantly in the past year. Diane and Robert's house, 4 doors down, had been foreclosed on in March 2026. The bank sold it in May for $340,000, well below market value. A young couple with 2 kids bought it. They'd introduced themselves when they moved in. "We heard about what happened with the previous owners," the husband, Kevin, had said. "We want you to know we're not like that." I'd welcome them to the neighborhood. The Pinewood Estates HOA had undergone a complete transformation. After Diane resigned and was arrested, the board held emergency elections. Sarah Mitchell, a retired accountant who'd lived in the community for 12 years, was elected president. Her first act was hiring a professional HOA management company to handle finances. Her second act was implementing strict financial oversight policies. No board member could approve contracts where they had a financial interest. All contracts over $5,000 required competitive bids from at least 3 vendors. All financial records were reviewed quarterly by an independent auditor. In June 2025, Sarah had called me. "Daniel, I know you've been through hell with this HOA, but we're rebuilding. We need people with financial expertise on the board. Would you consider serving as treasurer?" I'd laughed. "You want the FBI agent whose house you demolished to be your treasurer?" "I want the FBI agent who uncovered $876,000 in fraud to make sure it never happens again." I'd agreed. For the past year, I'd served as HOA treasurer. I reviewed every invoice, verified every vendor, reconciled bank statements monthly, presented detailed financial reports at every board meeting. The HOA's finances were cleaner than they'd been in a decade. Restitution payments from Diane and Robert had been slow but steady. Their vacation condo in Scottsdale had been seized and sold. $240,000 went to the restitution fund. Robert's construction company had been liquidated. Equipment, vehicles, and remaining contracts sold for $180,000. Their primary residence had been foreclosed and sold. After paying off the mortgage, $85,000 went to restitution. Personal assets, cars, jewelry, investments, had been liquidated for another $120,000. Total recovered so far, $625,000 of the $1,003,200 owed. The remaining $378,000 would be paid through garnished wages once Diane and Robert were released from prison. At 25% wage garnishment, it would take them years, possibly decades, to pay off the full amount. But the HOA had recovered enough to replenish its reserve fund and make necessary repairs that had been deferred during Diane's tenure. Today, December 14th, 2026, I was hosting a housewarming party. Neighbors started arriving at 2 p.m. Mike Torres and his wife brought a bottle of wine. "Daniel, this place looks incredible. Way better than the old house." Susan Chen brought homemade cookies. "I can't believe how nice this turned out. Diane would be furious if she could see it." The new neighbors, Kevin and Michelle, brought their kids and a casserole. Sarah Mitchell, the HOA president, arrived with her husband. "Daniel, on behalf of the Pinewood Estates HOA, I want to formally apologize, again, for what happened to you. What Diane did was unconscionable, but I also want to thank you. If you hadn't uncovered her fraud, she'd still be stealing from us." "I appreciate that, Sarah, but honestly, she made it easy to find. The evidence was everywhere once I started looking. Most people wouldn't have looked. Most people would have just sued and moved on. You investigated. You built a case. You sent her to federal prison. This community owes you." By 4 p.m., about 30 people had cycled through the house. Neighbors I'd barely known before all this had happened. They asked questions. How long did the construction take? Who was the contractor? How much did restitution cover? Some asked about Diane and Robert. Are they really in federal prison? Yes. Diane serving 8 years at FCI Waseca in Minnesota. Robert serving 5 years at FCI Englewood in Colorado. Do you ever think about them? Sometimes, but mostly I think about the 119 families they stole from, and the 6 homeowners they filed fraudulent liens against. Diane and Robert made their choices. Now they're facing the consequences. Around 5 p.m., as the party was winding down, Mike Torres stood in my new living room looking out the window toward where my old house had been. "You know what's funny? Diane demolished your house because she said it was an eyesore, said it was bringing down property values, and now you've built the nicest house on the street." I laughed. Guess she got rid of the eyesore after all, just not the way she planned. Susan Chen, standing nearby, raised her wine glass. To Daniel, the only person who got demolished by his HOA and came out ahead. Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. Mike grinned. Seriously, though, you turned getting your house demolished into an FBI investigation, a federal prosecution, 8 years in prison for your HOA president, and a brand new house paid for mostly by restitution. That's impressive. I thought about it, about the text message from Mike a year and a half ago, showing me a pile of rubble, about analyzing 6 years of HOA records at my kitchen table, about the search warrants and the trial and the sentencing. Sometimes people do you a favor without meaning to, I said. Diane demolished my old house. I built a better one. She went to federal prison. I became HOA treasurer. The community got financial oversight and accountability, and 119 families got their money back. I raised my glass. I'd say it worked out. Sarah Mitchell nodded. It did, for everyone except Diane and Robert. They made their choices. They thought they were untouchable because nobody was watching. They were wrong. Mike looked at me. Did you ever regret investigating? I mean, you could have just sued, gotten a settlement, and rebuilt. Instead, you spent months building a federal case. No regrets. If I'd just sued, Diane would have settled, paid me off, and kept embezzling from everyone else. She'd still be HOA president. Robert's company would still be overcharging for services. Other homeowners would still be getting fraudulent liens filed against them. Someone had to stop it. And that someone happened to be an FBI agent who specializes in financial fraud. Exactly. As the sun set and the party ended, I stood on my new front porch watching neighbors walk home. My phone buzzed, a text from Laura Hernandez. Saw your housewarming photos on the HOA newsletter. House looks great. How does it feel? I typed back, like justice. Diane demolished my house. I demolished her freedom. Fair trade. Laura replied, best case I ever worked. Enjoy the new place. I put my phone away and looked at my house. 1 year ago, this lot had been empty, just rubble and a foundation slab. Now it was home. Diane Merrick had spent 6 years embezzling from her neighbors, thinking nobody would ever catch her. She'd demolished my house thinking I was just another absentee homeowner who wouldn't fight back. She'd been wrong on both counts. I'd caught her. I'd investigated her. I'd built the case that sent her to federal prison for 8 years. And I'd rebuilt my house, better than before, mostly with her money. Sometimes the universe has a sense of irony. Diane had wanted to get rid of an eyesore. She succeeded. She just became the eyesore herself. I walked inside my new house, closed the door, and smiled. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it comes, it's worth the wait.